One, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Planning Applications Committee. Can I take apologies for absence, please? Are there any? We have no apologies. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Any declarations? No, thank you. And the minutes of the previous meeting, can we agree those as a correct record? Thank you very much. We only have one item tonight and we don't have any speakers. So we're moving straight to that item, which is agenda item 587, Robinson Road. I'll pass over to Jonathan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start sharing the screen. This is a proposal that members will have seen or will recall having seen some months ago. This is now the third application on the site. The proposals are to knock down an existing dwelling and erect a block of this time 9 flats. The application is being brought before committee once again because the nature of the ejections are such that they can't readily be overcome by way of attaching conditions. So the scheme of delegation requires we bring this case before you. I draw your attention to the modifications sheet just briefly. That has set out some extra text and some dimensions to help members understand how the proposals differ from the earlier scheme, and it's got some dimensions relating to the set-in of the proposals from the site boundary. If I can just take you through the latest scheme that we have. I'll just go back. Here's our site. It's a backland site on the north side of Robinson Road. The changes that you're being asked to look at essentially, I mean, you are being asked to make a decision on the application in its entirety, but essentially the proposals comprise an extra flat. So pretty much what's been shown on these other plans, the basement, the ground floor and the first floor, remain broadly similar, not identical, but broadly similar. And the proposals would introduce an additional flat comprising a second floor. If I can just clarify for members, the principle of a more intensive development on the site has been accepted. So a more intensive use. The access to the site has been accepted to serve a block of flats. The parking, again, if I can go back to the plans, you'll see again limited parking being proposed here. Again, broadly similar to what was considered and deemed to be acceptable before. The site is near a culverted watercourse to the north of the site. Flood risk has been dealt with. So again, what's being proposed now doesn't raise any new issues. Amenity space, which has been allocated for the units, that again is broadly similar to what's been approved in the past. So again, no new issues there. If I can just take you through some of the images from the earlier schemes, we have, if I can just call up this drawing. So we have, this was the scheme back in 2019 that was refused. I'm putting this on the screen because members may think, well, why was it that planners refused a scheme on 3 floors before, but are now considering supporting a scheme for 3 floors now? So this was the scheme that was refused at appeal. If I can just show now. So that was the approved, sorry, that's the approved scheme. You'll see that where I'm taking the arrow across, that was broadly where the other floor was being proposed, but remember the earlier scheme didn't dig down into the basement, so that's how they got the flats in. And if I just go down ever so slightly, so this is the latest proposal. So you can see here the extra unit which is being placed on the top. And if I can just toggle between the two, so you've got, so that's the refused scheme, and this is the proposed scheme, and then above that was the approved scheme. The applicant's designer came back to us informally with some revised plans after the scheme that was approved earlier this year was signed off. The proposals were for a particularly large flat on the roof, which extended, if you can see the arrow moving up and down here, and the arrow moving up and down here, that was roughly the extent of what was a very large flat on the roof. And at that time, I communicated with the architect, and I said, really, that was, you know, very much a case of development creep, almost creeping back to something similar to that which we'd only recently refused and had dismissed at appeal. So they revised the scheme, put this in as a formal submission. If I can go back to the plans again showing this scheme, and you can see this building is, sorry, the extra floor is tucked well in from the edge of the site, tucked back from the front, back from the rear, very much in from the sides, and to that extent our concerns regarding the visual impact on this property or this garden over here, I think really are no longer sustained. So the scheme providing the extra flat is deemed to be acceptable in visual terms. Members may have a concern regarding what appears to be a little bit of sort of development creep on the site. The scheme has a number of quite large flats, and in total, the scheme has the potential to, with a little bit of adjustment, accommodate 10 flats on the site. Now, 10 flats would trigger affordable housing. The scheme before you this evening is only for 9 flats, but officers have raised this issue with the applicant, and the applicant is amenable to entering into an agreement whereby, in the event that the scheme is substantially implemented and the applicant comes back with a scheme for 1 or more additional units, then the viability of the scheme in its entirety will be reviewed, and if there's any surplus profit in accordance with the normal formulas that we use, the council would then be able to exact a contribution towards affordable housing. So the scheme is recommended for approval, subject to those slight changes to the terms of any legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, please. Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. The previous scheme, the refuse scheme, went to appeal, and the appeal was dismissed. I haven't followed up on the inspector's report, but can you summarise what he substantially disliked about it, and whether any aspects of it that he was not, so concerned about?
Chair, the scheme that went to appeal, the inspector concurred with the officer's views, because it was a delegated refusal, the first scheme. The inspector concurred with the officer's views regarding the visual impact of the proposals close to the boundary with neighbouring properties. So the inspector didn't raise an issue with regards to the principle of a more intensive development of the site. But it was very much one of those ones where, in a sense, the inspector left the door open for the applicant to come back with a revised scheme. And that's why over the last 15 months, we've been in discussion on the second scheme, an interim proposal, and now this proposal. So I'm confident that we're not doing something which is riding roughshod over the appeal decision.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. On page 12 and 13 of the report, it gives the reason for the refusal of the original 3-storey application. And one of the reasons, number 3, in fact, is the lack of a waste management plan. But if I'm reading the report correctly, we still don't have a waste management plan. And I just wondered what that meant for our considerations this evening.
Chair, the waste management arrangements were something which flowed from our observations of what was quite a narrow access to the site. And I think this was one of those sites where there were concerns about the block of flats being able to be properly serviced by the council's refuse collectors. We've moved on from that now, and whilst technically this is an issue which at the time of the earlier scheme we felt should at least be flagged up as a reason for refusal, we're now at a stage where all other aspects of the proposals are such that officers feel able to support the scheme. And so it would now be rather peevish for us to cite that as a reason for refusal, when realistically we're in dialogue with the applicant to ensure a proper refuse collection arrangement is in place before the flats are occupied. And that was a condition that was attached to the scheme that was that was considered by and approved by members in spring this year. So that's something which in spring this year, members, as officers did, moved on to that next step to say, we're happy with the scheme in general terms, but we'd still like that matter to be dealt with. But we don't feel it's such an issue now that we'd refuse permission on that point alone.
Thank you.
Questions? Oh, comments, please.
Oh, sorry, could I have another question?
You can go ahead.
On page 43 of the report, we have the kind of aerial plan which shows the bins, the cycle racks, and the 3 car parking spaces. And it kind of occurs to me that the amenity of the neighbouring residents could be affected by more cars parking in the space. Because when one looks at the plan, it looks like there's space possibly for 5 or 6 cars. And I'm just wondering whether the conditioning is effective in the way in which we may find that, say, 2 years down the line, there's an awful lot of cars parked on this site.
Chair, if I can just share one of the images again. Oh, sorry, I've cropped that off.
It's page 4
sorry,
in
yes.
the report, if that helps people.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Crowe. The image that I was trying to show on the screen was that what is being showed now in terms of the layout is little different from what was approved back in spring this year. I don't think as a planning authority we could attach a condition that would reasonably be enforceable to avoid cars being parked perhaps on a short-term basis on that site, where, for example, someone with a small white van might drive into the access road, drive up to the front of the building, park for 10 minutes while unloading, I don't know, a dishwasher or a washing machine or a fridge, and then may drive away again. And you know, we couldn't regulate that kind of activity and short-term parking within the site. If additional cars were parked on the site, that's something which wouldn't result in any overspill onto Robinson Road itself. But I think we've got, if I can just go back to the conditions that have been attached to this scheme. Yes, we haven't got a condition that restricts additional parking from being provided on the site. As I've said, the scheme that was before members previously simply showed those 3 parking spaces, and given that there has to be a day-to-day arrangement whereby refuse can be placed to the front of the building, and there needs to be a permanent arrangement whereby cycle parking can be provided, I think it's unlikely that any more than 1 additional car could be squeezed onto that site at any time. So I don't think it's something that we really need to get immersed in.
Chair, sorry, can I just intervene there? If you page 28, condition 14.
Oh, sorry.
I appreciate there was a lot of conditions, Jonathan. So I appreciate you probably could go through them all when trying to speak at the same time. But we've got not less than 1 and no more than 3 off-street car parking spaces shall be permitted. So we've got that covered.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I've got a question. It actually relates to what Councillor Crowe was talking about on page 43. And because I'm drawing attention to this because it's happening in my ward, where we've got these very narrow alleyways and then a big development at the back of it. And in terms of their waste, you will have 9 flats there with 9 lots of waste every week or fortnight, depending on what's coming out. But when it comes to the 2 bins, or if they're going to have a very large bin, the people that are going to be experiencing that waste are the ones at number 85 and 89, because there is no space between them. And, you know, I just wonder how we personally would feel about having everybody's waste bins outside our house cluttering up the road. So it's one thing, one of the things that bothers me a little bit about planning now, that these things really do need to be taken into account, because people do have to live with the consequences of what we're suggesting here. And you said that there couldn't be a condition attached to it. I can't understand why there couldn't be a condition attached to that. One of the developments in my ward that had a similar problem to this, the people in the police that have moved in there had no idea what to do with their waste because nobody told them. And their waste wasn't being collected, and they were complaining that their waste wasn't being removed. Somebody had to go and explain to them, this is what you need to do. But, you know, it is a major issue, waste. And if you come to my ward where we have fly tipping galore, you know, this becomes one more major problem. So I really don't understand why there can't be a waste disposal condition. I really don't understand that.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Kirby. The point that Councillor Crowe raised before related to why we weren't refusing it on that same
I'm not
ground.
suggesting
But-
refusal. I'm just
No,
asking
but
about a condition about
yes.
how it's going to be maintained.
No, we will have a condition requiring that waste management plan to be submitted to and signed off by the planning officers before the units can be occupied. And if that means that the applicant has to make arrangements outside of those which the council as refuse collectors would normally find acceptable, then that's something that's going to be an on-cost or a service charge for the residents of that block. So I think in terms of the conditions that we've attached to the recommendation, they are, as I've said, similar to those that were attached to the scheme which was approved, and officers do have a perfectly reasonable opportunity to make sure that any arrangements that are in place don't give rise to undue harm to neighbour amenity. So I acknowledge your concerns, and that's something that we can certainly pick up with the designers when we move on to the stage of signing off conditions.
You know, and I do think it's a serious issue. Councillor Dean.
I think you're right, Chair, and quite clearly we need to propose that it is a condition specifically, as you said.
Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Southgate.
Yes, it's on the same point, really. It would be better, surely, if the site had Eurobins, which were then managed by the management company, rather than we could otherwise have 18 wheelie bins plus food waste bins out there one week, and the recycling out another week. So that doesn't seem too efficient, really, does it? It would be much better if there was some communal waste management plan, but my question really is whether we can condition that.
Yes, I mean, certainly condition 8 on page 26, that provides us with a legitimate opportunity to properly review the arrangements that are being put forward. And as I said, given that this issue came up in the debate regarding the 8-unit scheme in spring this year, I think officers are more than aware of the concerns of members of the planning committee, that this is something that needs to be handled very sensitively, so as to ensure that the refuse is stored properly and doesn't give rise to harm to neighbours.
Well, well, here's an example. If you've got one of these very large containers that they're all putting their waste in, who in the 9 flats is going to be responsible for wheeling that down to the end of the path every week? It's an issue. It's a major issue. And who's going to be responsible for moving it back? Because one of the big problems we've got in our ward is that the bins come to the front and they don't go back again, and then other people dump their rubbish next to it. And it's a really big issue. It doesn't seem like it. It may not feel like a planning issue, but it's a nuisance, an absolute nuisance. So we do want a strong recommendation. And how they solve that problem is the management of that site. But once the development's there, they'll be leaving it to the people that live there to sort it out, and it won't get sorted. It's a big problem. Okay, said me a bit. Comments, please. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as one of the councillors representing the ward in which this development resides, we are looking at only really the difference between the last plan that we passed only 6 odd months ago and what is now. And in that original plan, things like waste and parking were all dealt with. In terms of local residents in the area, before the very first application, more than 2 years ago, was decided by officers, I did have quite a number of the residents locally contacting me and other councillors with concerns about the site. And I understand there's been 2 or 3 letters in about this one of objection, but we haven't been contacted by people with great concerns. The reduced height has obviously placated local residents compared to the 3-story all above ground before. Basically, it's a good development, bring much needed new housing into Collier's Wood. The refuse will be dealt with under condition 8, I'm sure, and I'm happy to leave officers to that. So the recommendation is to approve, and I would suggest we go to the vote and do just that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Yes, Councillor Henry.
Yes, I do agree with Councillor Kirby. Where the rubbish and the waste collection here, we should definitely ensure that there is a waste collection area. The reason being is it's not only one flat, it's a multitude of flats, and there will be many people living there. So therefore, we definitely need an area, and because we're going to create an issue that we cannot manage. So we need to address it before it get any further. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dean.
Basically, I think, Chair, you need to make that recommendation with regard to waste, and then we should vote on it, including that recommendation.
Are there any other comments you want to make? No? Councillor Ward.
Really, the recommendation, I don't know exactly what recommendation Councillor Dean's referring to there, but the recommendation seems to me to be exactly what is written in condition 8. No development should take place until waste management strategy has been agreed with the planning authority. All the things we put in every time there's a new application. A waste management strategy must be agreed before the building can be occupied.
Thank you.
That's already a condition. We're happy with that.
I'm quite happy with the condition. I don't see it as an issue for refusal. For me, this application is about planning creep and nothing more. I mean, an application's gone through and now they want to put another layer on the top, and that's what we're looking at. And that layer has been moved back so that it isn't affecting. So I think we'll put it to the vote. I don't need an additional condition for this. I think I'm reassured by Jonathan's line, but I do think the waste issue is a major issue that's taken very lightly by planning. So can we move to the vote then? Can I see those in favour of the application? Please show. I think that's unanimous. I can't, yeah, that seems to me. We do need to record this vote electronically, please. Thank you. So that's unanimously supported. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item, let me have a look, 6, which is planning enforcement. This is to note, and if you have any particular issues around planning enforcement, please will you take them up directly with officers. And the planning appeals decision at number 7, again, is an item for us to just to note. Can I say, tonight's my last meeting as chair. I've enjoyed my 6 years in the chair, and I'd like to thank all the officers that I've been involved with. It's been very entertaining. Thanks to the committee as well for your support. Dave Ward will be taking over as chair at the next meeting, so I wish him success. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I've done, Dave. And can I also wish Rebecca Lanning congratulations on being promoted to the cabinet. And so I don't know what other roles people are going to, because it's a bit beyond me really. But anyway, whatever it is you're doing in your new roles, but I hope you enjoy your new positions. Okay, so I am ending the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.